Now, from our experience, it is sometimes challenging to distinguish between three elements of this results chain. And these are the outputs, the outcomes, and the impacts. So together we refer to these as the results. And it's maybe a bit confusing because the term results was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, maybe meant something else in EU jargon. But now if we talk about results, we mean both outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And it is sometimes difficult to distinguish between them, but it's important because this builds our intervention logic. So the next couple of slides focus on how you can distinguish between outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So basically three questions you can ask. First question is, what part of this results chain is under the control of the ones responsible for the intervention? Now, here you see the same results chain. Yeah, so the same five elements: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. The only difference being that on the right for outcomes and for impacts, we sometimes use the term specific objective and overall objective. Basically, they're the same level. Now, how does this question of what is under the control of the intervention help us distinguish? Well, the first part of this results chain, so from inputs up until outputs, we call this the sphere of control. Why? Because it is fully the responsibility of the intervention to make sure that the inputs are mobilized, the activities are done, and the outputs are produced. No possibility to blame anyone else if they're not done. It's purely because the intervention didn't do its job. Sphere of control. But then we have the outcomes, which are basically outside our control. So if we think back to the example of the vocational education, we do not control what the teachers do. Of course, we can motivate them, we can enable them or empower or whatever you want, but we cannot force them to adopt the new methods and to change their behavior. In fact, some of them may not change their behavior. And maybe we need to take that into account. So that's why we call it the sphere of direct influence. Why direct? Because we work with them. In these activities, the teachers are involved. We ask them about the investments, we give them the new methods, we train them, throughout the project, they are involved. So that's why it's direct influence. We do not control, but we influence them, and hopefully we can influence them enough to change their behavior. And then finally, we have the sphere of indirect influence. Now, this influence is not so strong as for the outcomes. And why? Because these other addressees, as it's written here, these the final beneficiaries, they may not be involved in these activities. And these are these students in the example of the vocational education intervention. Yeah, so we can only hope to improve their situation through the target group, i.e. the teachers. So by influencing directly the teachers, we can hopefully indirectly influence the students. So that's question number one. Yeah, and you see that if you want to distinguish between output, outcome, and impact, you just have to ask, do we control it? Do we directly influence or indirectly influence? Second question. When will these types of results materialize? So this is the time aspect. And it is clear, of course, that, these inputs, the resources, they will have to be made available before or at least somewhere during the intervention. The same goes for the activities. All the activities will have to be done during the intervention. And the outputs. All of the outputs have to be produced by the time the project ends. No excuses. We cannot expect someone else to produce these. So project is over, we have used inputs, we've done all the activities, and we've produced everything we needed to produce. Then the outcomes, they may happen, these changes may happen during the intervention, but sometimes they happen after the end of the intervention, and not long after, but maybe a few months or maximum half a year. Well, it depends a bit on the type and the nature of the intervention. But we would surely hope to see some of that change appearing towards the end of the intervention. Now, here, the people who have a lot of experience among you and who've worked in EU programs for, let's say, 15 or more years, may notice sort of a shift in thinking here, because when I was involved in the evaluation of the FARO program, we had this clear rule that the specific objectives, which we now call outcomes, have to be achieved by the end of the intervention. Now, that is not as strict anymore because it's just not realistic. Some of that change can only start to be developed or materialized once everything has been done. Yeah, so some change in terms of outcome may happen before the end, and some of it relatively quickly after. That leaves us with the impact, and that may take a long time. Some of it could happen relatively fast after the end, but it may take years. In the case of our vocational education example, maybe it doesn't take years. But then again, it depends on how we have formulated the impact. If the impact was, improved job opportunities for these students, it surely takes years. If we have infrastructural projects in environment, it surely takes years for these impacts to happen. So that is the second question. First one was, do we control or influence? Second one is, when do these results happen? Third question, who do these results apply to? And we've referred to it a little bit already before. First of all, we take a look at the ones responsible for the intervention. Let's say we, us. So we have to mobilize the resources, we have to do the activities, and we include the contractors we hire, and we have to deliver those outputs. So what about the outcomes? Well, the outcomes refer to change behavior or circumstances of the target group, not our change. So the teachers in the vocational education example. And as we said, we cannot force them, so we should hope we can influence them, and then they have to do something. And if we talk about impacts, then we talk about final beneficiaries. This is a much wider group, and they may not be involved at all, or only sideways in the intervention. So these three questions are, of course, related to each other. Yeah, because we only influence indirectly, it takes more time. That's logical. And because they are not directly involved, we do not control, or we don't even directly influence. Yeah, so the three questions are related. But I think whenever you have doubt, is this an outcome, or is it an impact, or an output, ask these three questions. And they usually point in the same direction, not always, but then it's not black and white, absolutely. It's not, an exact science, but it does help. These three questions really help you improve the quality of the intervention logic by allowing you to put it at the right level. That's a start.